guys. So glad you're here today. I get to introduce to you our brand new book that we're reading with all of third grade. So, hi, third graders. I haven't seen some of you in a few weeks. I'm excited to be reading to you and introducing this chapter book. We are going to start a book by Andrew Clements. Now, that name might sound familiar to some of you. I bet a few of you at least have read some of his books. He has written the Jake Drake books. I think a lot of kids come from second grade having read some Jake Drake. He's great. Good for third graders too if you need something else to read. But the book we're reading is not in the Jake Drake series. It is a book called Frindle, and it is the story of a boy named Nick, and Nick is a bit of a mess. As we read, we're going to be thinking about character traits, just like we've done all year. So we're going to be looking for what is the trait of the main character, Nick, and then on top of that, how do we know? What's the evidence we can find in our story? So I'm going to go ahead and tell you before we read chapter 1, a character trait I want you to listen for. You're going to try to find evidence of Nick being mischievous, creating mischief. So he's kind of a bit of a prankster, and I want you to find evidence of that. Chapter 1, Nick. If you ask the kids and the teachers at Lincoln Elementary School to make 3 lists, all the really bad kids, all the really smart kids, and all the really good kids, Nick Allen would not be on any of them. Nick deserved a list all his own, and everyone knew it. Was Nick a troublemaker? Hard to say. One thing's for sure, Nick Allen had plenty of ideas, and he knew what to do with them. One time, in 3rd grade, Nick decided to turn Miss Deaver's room into a tropical island. What kid in New Hampshire isn't ready for summer vacation in February? So first, he got everyone to make small palm trees out of green and brown construction paper and tape them onto the corners of each desk. Miss Deaver had only been a teacher for about 6 months, and she was delighted. "That's so cute," she said. "Seems harmless enough, doesn't it?" The next day, all the girls wore paper flowers in their hair, and all the boys wore sunglasses and beach hats. Miss Deaver clapped her hands and said, "It's so colorful." The day after that, Nick turned the classroom thermostat up about 90 degrees with a little screwdriver he had brought from home. What's the thermostat? Is that a word you know? Maybe think about thermometer. We use a thermometer to take our temperature. So thermo has to do with heat. The thermostat controls the temperature in a room. So he's turning it up, cranking it up so it's nice and hot in there. All the kids changed into shorts and t-shirts and no shoes. And when Miss Deaver left the room for a minute, Nick spread about 10 cups of fine white sand all over the classroom floor. Miss Deaver was surprised again at just how creative her students could be. But the sand got tracked out into the hallway where Manny, the custodian, did not think it was creative at all, and he stomped right down to the office. The principal followed the trail of sand, and when she arrived, Miss Deaver was teaching the hula to some kids near the front of the room, and a tall, thin, shirtless boy with chestnut hair was just spiking a Nerf ball over a net made from 6 t-shirts tied together. The 3rd grade trip to the South Seas ended suddenly. But that didn't stop Nick from trying to liven things up. Lincoln Elementary needed a good jolt once in a while, and Nick was just the guy to deliver it. Have you heard already one way that Nick is mischievous? Making mischief at school? I think we're about to get one more. See if you can find it. About a year later, Nick made the great blackbird discovery. One night, he learned on a TV show that red-winged blackbirds give this high-pitched chirp when a hawk or some other danger comes near. Because of the way sound travels, the hunter birds can't tell where the high-pitched chirp is coming from. The next day during silent reading, Nick glanced at his teacher and he noticed that Mrs. Avery's nose was curved, kind of like the beak of a hawk. So Nick let out a high, squeaky blackbird beep. Mrs. Avery jerked her head up from her book and looked around. She couldn't tell who didn't, so she just said, "Shh," to the whole class. A minute later, Nick did it again, louder. Peep! This time there was a little giggling from the class, but Mrs. Avery pretended not to hear the sound, and about 15 seconds later, she slowly stood up and walked to the back of the classroom. What do you think she's going to do? Without taking his eyes off his book and without moving at all, Nick put his heart and soul into the highest and most annoying chirp of all. Peep! Mrs. Avery pounced. "Janet Fisk, you stop that this instant." Janet, who was sitting 4 rows away from Nick, promptly turned white, then bright crimson. What color is crimson? I have a feeling that Janet is feeling embarrassed, right? She's getting called out for doing something that she didn't do. I bet she turned kind of a pink color, like she's blushing, flushed, right? So crimson is kind of a red color. But it wasn't me. Honest. There was a catch in Janet's voice, as if she might cry. Mrs. Avery knew she had made a mistake, and she apologized to Janet. "But someone is asking for big trouble," said Mrs. Avery, looking more like a hawk every second. Nick kept reading, and he didn't make a peep. At lunchtime, Nick talked to Janet. He felt bad that Mrs. Avery had pounced on her. Janet lived in Nick's neighborhood, and sometimes they played together. She was good at baseball, and she was better at soccer than most of the kids in the whole school, boys or girls. Nick said, "Hey, Janet, I'm sorry you got yelled at during reading. It was my fault. I was the one who made that sound." What character trait describes somebody who apologizes like that? He knows he made a mistake. He should have confessed. He let Janet take the fall for what he did, and he has the guts to say he's sorry. How would you describe someone who does that? Keep thinking on it. "You did," said Janet, "but how come Mrs. Avery thought it was me?" So Nick told her about the blackbirds, and Janet thought it was pretty interesting. Then she tried making a peep or two, and Janet's chirps were even higher and squeakier than Nick's. She promised to keep everything a secret. For the rest of Nick's 4th grade year, at least once a week, Mrs. Avery heard a loud peep from somewhere in her classroom. Sometimes it was a high-pitched chirp, and sometimes it was a very high-pitched chirp. Mrs. Avery never figured out who was making that sound, and gradually she trained herself to ignore it, but she still looked like a hawk. To Nick, the whole thing was just one long and successful science experiment, and Janet Fisk enjoyed it too. I have a feeling we have met a character who is going to be up to some trouble, and I can't wait to see all the fun that Nick gets into in his class. I hope you'll keep listening. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to be taking turns reading, so you'll get to see all the 3rd grade teachers, and I hope you have so much fun. Don't forget to do the assignment questions that go with the video in your AMI packets. See you later.